Hello, my name is John Rose, and in this video I'd like to take a closer look at money and medicine. And in order to understand the connection between money and medicine, in order to understand the evils of money and medicine, we have to understand that everything in our society of any significance has everything to do with the fact that there is something seriously wrong with our species. And the biggest problem we have is we've lost one of our senses. The biggest problem we have is that most people think we're only supposed to have 5 senses, and we really don't understand how important that 6th sense is, our spidey sense. This is what contributes to the dark side of our behavior. This is what contributes to the fact that we prey systematically upon our own species, that we compete for resources on an abundant planet when we should cooperate and share the abundance this planet has to offer. So that's the most important thing we have to understand, is that there's something wrong with us, and then in order for the status quo to remain the status quo, we've got to remain sick and disconnected. So that's where the money comes into play. Money is the absolute tool of control that this very small group of people use to own and control every major sector of human endeavor, so they can bombard our brains with bullshit and we won't know that. And if you can control what people know, you can control what people do, and that's what's happening right now on this planet. There's a very small group of people who are able to brainwash us and for us to never figure out why we're sick. They can misdirect our so-called experts, those in medicine and in nutrition. In fact, every field that has the potential to solve a problem, whether it's logic or philosophy, these fields are manipulated, I guarantee you, because I've studied these, and I can tell they're being controlled. I'll never forget the first book I looked at, logic, after I perfected my special teaching tool that can find flaws in everything. I realized, by God, whoever wrote this book is not very logical, wasn't put together right, and out of the 100 or more pieces they identified, we only need 2 of them. There's no way the average person is going to be able to go, okay, let's use these 2. In fact, what's logic used for? To solve problems. There's only 2 things we need to understand in logic to solve our problems. And that's where I say there are 2 tests we have to take. And interestingly, it's all based on how we are born. Every living system has 2 forms of 2-valued logic. And one of them is pleasure and pain. Our brains are wired for pleasure and pain. And then we're living systems, so we're subject to the law of cause and effect. So I digress quite a bit here, but it's important to understand that all these fields of so-called experts aren't experts at all. When you study logic, things should be simpler and make more sense. How is it you first get into it, doesn't make sense? A year later, like, what? Why do I need 4 years to learn logic? All we need are 2 things in logic to understand how to solve problems, so we don't get tricked and fooled. And that's what's happening to our so-called experts. They don't realize there are no logical fallacies in what they do, but they don't realize they're taking the first step in the wrong direction. So if I was to hire you to find a sunset and gave you a big budget to find it, but I had you take your first step east, you go, boss, there are no logical fallacies. Everything I've done is right. Why can't I find the sunset? You're looking the wrong way. So that's what the rulers of the world do. They're tricksters. They're magicians. They're con artists. They're psychopaths. And they're a reflection of us because we're sick and disconnected. So what's the relationship between money and medicine? Medicine is the ultimate tool of control, whereas money is the absolute tool of control. Money is what is used by this small group of people, once again, to own and control everything so they can control what you know. And if we don't know what to do, we'll make mistakes and be easily controlled. So it's a vicious cycle that repeats itself unless we get reconnected. That's why I say over and over and over, if we're not getting reconnected, everything else is a distraction. And even when you look at money, there's many layers to money. It's not as simple as one might think. Money is one of our 10 subsequent needs because we're sick and disconnected. We have 12 essential needs, and then we have 2 additional temporary needs. One of those are 10 subsequent needs from being sick and disconnected. We have a subsequent need for education, for money, for media, for government, even religion and spirituality. And what happens with all of our needs is that they can be used against us. They can be a weapon system that's used against us. Food is one of our needs. It can be used against us. Let's poison the food. Genetically modify, grow it on artificial fertilizers, spray it with pesticides. Look, it's magic. It looks like food. It's not food. Money can be used as a weapon system. Government can be used as a weapon system. All of our needs can be used against us. In fact, there's a common link to solving every problem that's 100% within control and conquering nations and controlling the masses. It all has to do with satisfying these two groups of needs. How do you solve problems that are within our control? It's simple, satisfy your needs. Why do we have a problem? Because we're not satisfying our needs. Let's keep it simple. Our problems are either 100% within our control based on what we do, are we satisfying our needs, or they're not 100% within our control based on things done to us. So most of our problems are based on the things we do. We don't know what to do, so we make mistakes and we have problems. And we become sick and disconnected. So the biggest piece of the puzzle right now is understanding that something's wrong with us. We're sick and disconnected. So now we have a dark side to our behavior. I coined this condition that creates it, hypoheliosis, at an abnormally low biphoton level. That's where we don't have one of our senses. Now we have 10 subsequent needs from being sick and disconnected, from hypoheliosis, from the fall of mankind, when we took the first thing we mastered, applied it to our food, and destroyed the biphotons. This is what sets everything up. That's why it's the number one cause. That's why if you want to solve the problems we have in government or money, go back to the first cause, get reconnected. Don't you see that solves all the problems? We got 10 subsequent needs because we're sick and disconnected. We shouldn't have organized education where they can control us on such a massive level and dumb us down as they are. We shouldn't have a subsequent need for money. That comes from an exchange mentality, from the wrong mentality, because we lost one of our senses. So what's the connection between money and medicine? It's all connected. Everything has to do with the fact that we're sick. That's why they control medicine. And then how do they do it? They use the money. Why do we need money? Because we're sick and disconnected. You see how it's a vicious cycle? So, solution, get reconnected. Work downstream, deal with the money concept, make it better. What do? Well, let's do what Germany and Japan did last century. They broke away and they said, we're not going to play that money game anymore. The rest of you guys are starving all around the world. America, we were starving to death, the Great Depression. What was happening over here? Germany and Japan, they broke away. They didn't want to play that money game. What happened to them? They became rich and prosperous. Germany went from the richest country in the world, or poorest, to the richest. In 4 years, they called it the German miracle. That's why Hitler was Time Magazine Man of the Year in 1938. What did they do? Oh my God, they proved to the world we live on an abundant planet. When we don't let someone else print our money and get us to play the money game, we got to stop playing the money game. We got to stop playing this organized medicine game. We got to take responsibility. We got to be the best that we can be. We got to go upstream, get reconnected. We got to realize, look, we can't change everything overnight. We're going to have this collective wrong mentality for a while. Eventually, we'll have a gift mentality, and we won't have an exchange mentality. That's the ultimate solution to all these subsequent needs. And remember, that's all you have to do to control everybody. That's how you conquer a nation. Don't let them satisfy their needs. Enact an embargo. We enacted an embargo a long time before Japan came over. That's the first act of war. Did the same thing to Germany. It's what we did to people in the Middle East. It goes back to the art of war, Sun Tzu. Nothing changes. We don't have access to history. People who rule the world have access to a lot of history. They know how to control us. We're oblivious. We don't even know what happened last century. And yet most of us are waking up going, can't believe the official story of this or that. Why would we believe the official story of anything last century? Is it all bullshit? Of course not. Couldn't be. There are a lot of facts that are true at last history, but there's a lot of bullshit. And were there bad times? Of course there were some bad times. Don't think I'm not aware of that. We live in hell. It's bad everywhere, whether we're in war or not. And don't forget democide. 262 million people were murdered last century by government during peacetime. We're going to repeat itself again because we're not learning from history because we don't have the history. And we don't want to go too much into too much detail because we got too many references that make us think a certain way, and then that's going to keep us from learning the real lesson. We live on an abundant planet. Germany and Japan were thriving when the rest of the world was starving. Wake up, come on. Odious debt. Iceland challenged their debt a few years back. What happened? Was it 93% of their debt, I think, was odious, made up bullshit? It's happening here in America. We're enslaving our children. We are enslaved. It's one of the two ways you conquer a nation, by the sword and by debt. Money controls us. We're debt slaves. Medicine keeps us sick, and that's why we have the subsequent need for money. How do you deal with money? Well, let's look what Germany and Japan did, and let's learn from what they did. Let's have debt-free currency instead of debt-based currency. That's a start. And you don't even need to have the money backed by gold and silver. Doesn't have to be representative money with those type of commodities. Use your labor force. That's your asset. Remember, this planet is like a construction company. Tons of raw material, tons of labor. We're building stuff, but that small group of people has siphoned off all the profits for a long time. And we're oblivious to it. They've got all the money, so when people think, oh yeah, medicine and money, it's all about making money. No, it's all about us not having money. It's all about having us have another expense, so that in America, half of us work our butt off all life only to spend the last decade in misery, and half of us file in bankruptcy because of medical bills. It's by design to keep us poor. It's a form of feudalism, neo-feudalism. And it's all about being disconnected. Remember, it's not that complicated if we can get reconnected, but we have to do downstream work. We have to take away the absolute tool of control that's being used to control the masses. There are some mathematicians in Switzerland that were able to trace back 40,000 transnational companies. And it turns out there is a small interlocking board of directors that is behind the vast majority of these. There's a small group owning and controlling everything. And if we were to look at a world balance sheet and look at all the assets of these guys and us, it'd be a wake-up call. You guys have no idea how much they have, and how all they care about is making sure we don't have enough. That's why the biggest threat to these people are the upper middle class people who have money, who can actually learn and study things like I'm trying to tell you now. Most people don't have access to this information. And now we have access to it in a way that didn't exist when I was younger. It would have been impossible virtually for me to have stumbled upon this knowledge, which is how you're doing it. Look at you guys, you're stumbling upon me. I'm telling you things that are challenging your belief system, the way to live, the way the world is being ruled, and what happened last century and last history. How events were fabricated, blown out of proportion, taken out of context, are on and on and on, and we don't need to even go there. Remember, we got too many references that are going to keep us from really realizing the only thing that's important, and that is to realize that we need to take back control of our economic systems. We can't let a small group of people continue to do what they're doing to the rest of us. And it's a start. And as long as we have a subsequent need for money, we're still going to struggle. And of course, the biggest part of money, and a lot of people don't understand this, is what people will say, well, it's not money, it's the love of money, right? It's greed. Well, greed doesn't have to do with our subsequent need for money as much as it does the dark side of our behavior. You see, greed is just another symptom from hypohelios. And hypohelios is one of the several contributing factors to the dark side of our behavior. Hypercolonic tension is another contributing factor to the dark side of our behavior. That's why the second mistake we made darkened the dark side of our behavior. Because what I'm talking about now is that serpent that lives within us. That slow, stagnant cesspool that the vast majority of us carry around ourselves and are totally oblivious to. And it affects them. In fact, I was surrounded by serpents the other day when I went looking for some electronic equipment. I was blown away I was at a station, there was about 6 male employees there. Every one of them had massive, 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 massive bellies. And then I saw a couple customers, and they too had these massive, massive, massive bellies. I guess I don't get out enough. When I do, I usually go out on the bayou, and most people were exercising, and there's some bigger people out there too, but man, oh man, I was surrounded by serpents. And I was looking at them, trying to figure out, what are they thinking, what are they feeling, how's that serpent affecting them? And then I looked at this one woman, I could tell she was in anguish. I could look at her and I could see the pain on her face. Oh, and I was going, oh, you have a serpent, my dear. And it's contributing to you in ways you don't understand. I'll never forget the first long juice fast I went on. And I was toward the end, like 80 something, and I would eliminate something the size of my little pinky. And when it came out, my skin literally just tingled all over. I was going, oh wow, I can't believe I feel so much better about getting that little piece of shit out of me after I'd already got about 20 pounds of it out of me. And then of course, I immediately thought, God, no wonder we suffer. No wonder we can't get along. No wonder we are lazy and we judge other people. Of course, that's by design too. We're being tricked and fooled, don't you see? We're being programmed at levels we don't understand to divide and conquer. I had a comment this morning from my neighbor who made a comment about, oh, that's a male thing. And I go, you don't realize that's a reflection of you being programmed to divide and conquer us. Black, white, man, woman, rich, poor, divide and conquer, Muslim, Christian. That's what psychopaths do. It's all about distraction. Everything's a distraction. And all they have to do is just bombard our brains with bullshit, and we'll have too many references to look at the things we need to look at. What do we need to look at? Organized medicine, number one. They don't have the answers. They are not the experts. Please don't trust what these people are doing because they're not trustworthy. They've been misdirected. And then we also have to understand the role money plays. We have to understand that one day we could do away with our exchange mentality if we could simply reach the tipping point. It's doable right now. But until it happens, we're going to struggle getting this message out because we really don't have an avenue for its presentation. And that's mainly because of the control money has and our subsequent need for money. You see, this is what gets a lot of us in trouble. Look at all the doctors. They got all that money. And the thing about money, the more money you have, you just simply spend more of it. And if you've been making a lot of money, what are you doing? You're spending a lot of money, so you want to keep that lifestyle going. So it's very difficult for some professions to understand the wisdom in having less and wanting less. He who has little and wants less is a whole lot more wealthier than he who has a lot and wants more. That's the trick in life, is to learn how to want less. That's the goal that we should have. We shouldn't have to be like weasels. That's not the right word I'm thinking of. That hoards things. And I'm not thinking of squirrels either. But anyway, that's not what we're supposed to be doing. We shouldn't say, I got to accumulate all this wealth so when I retire I can pay my medical bills and not end up bankrupt like everyone else. No, man. The way things are now, we have to worry about that, but we're in Plato's cave. We're on the wrong path. Everything we're doing now is to try to make this path better. We got to get off this path. We got to get out of the hell we're in, and we can. And until then, we're going to have these subsequent needs. Remember, one common link between solving problems that are within our control, conquering nations, enacting embargo, and controlling the masses. How do you control the masses? Don't let them satisfy their needs. Misdirect all the so-called experts so that none of us will ever figure out how to live. And what happens? We're going to be sick and disconnected, and things will continue on and on and on and on. So we need to break this cycle. We've got to put an end to the needless suffering on this planet, and there's a lot of it. It's needless, and we can do something about it. And it begins by doing the first of a three-step process that I perfected. If you go down below in the description box, you'll see a link to my first step, and you'll see that preceded by an interview with Dr. Roba. I highly recommend listening to that if you haven't already, and my appearance on the Deborah Duncan Show with 6 of my students. So you can see and hear testimonies of people. This is a powerful, powerful thing we can do individually. And we have to understand that as long as we have an individual shadow, we'll have a collective shadow, and it's the collective shadow that keeps us where we are. It's those unwanted aspects of those psychopaths that don't want us to wake up. And they use money as a tool. Got to take away their tool, and then once we get reconnected, once we reach a tipping point, we'll have a different mentality, We won't have these other needs, so now we can't be controlled, don't you see? How do you control society? You don't let them satisfy their needs. Now that can be done several ways. It can be done very subtly by giving us false information and controlling and misdirecting our experts. And if that doesn't work, well, we'll just create a crisis and we'll starve you. That's how so many people were murdered last century. Simple starvation. And it can be done right now. In 1 month, there could be millions of people dead in America. And it can be done very easily. Think about living in a big city and the power going out. What's going to happen? A lot of people are going to die if they don't get food, and they're going to start freaking out. That's why we got to get our act together soon. Because my poor dog is all tangled up. Come on, baby, you got 2 legs tangled up. Anyway, we got to do something soon. We can't waste any more time. We got to get reconnected. Got to stop getting distracted. Got to quit looking at details that are just going to take you down a rabbit hole you don't need to. There's only one thing we have to do initially for most of us, and that's get reconnected. Do the first step. I guarantee you, when you do, you're in for a treat.